Lessons from Judge Caprio, the judge who turns fines into forgiveness. When most of us think of a courtroom, we immediately think of tense trials where the law is strictly enforced and where people often tremble when they enter. But there is a special place, a small courtroom in Providence, Rhode Island, where justice is served not only by law, but also by heart and compassion. And standing at the top of that room is a man known to the world as Judge Frank Caprio. Caprio is more than just a judge. He is a teacher, a father, and in the eyes of many, a friend. His trials are shared everywhere, attracting hundreds of millions of views. People don't just watch out of curiosity about simple traffic violations. They watch because they want to feel the humanity in justice.
Imagine you're walking into a courthouse for the first time. Your hands are shaking, you're sweating, you're nervous, because just thinking about the word court makes you scared. You're afraid of having to pay a fine you can't afford. You're afraid of being treated coldly, like a number in a rigid legal system. But then, when you look up, you see an old man with a gentle smile, sparkling eyes, and a warm voice. He doesn't start with a stern sentence. Instead, he asks you a simple question. How are you today? How's your family? That's how Judge Caprio often opens a trial. He doesn't treat the offender as a criminal, but as a human being, with worries, difficulties, and inevitable mistakes.
One of the most touching moments in Caprio's courtroom was when a single mother walked in. She had been fined for parking in the wrong spot. Under normal circumstances, she would have had to pay what, for many people, would have been a meal at a restaurant. But for her, it was the cost of raising her children for a week. As she stood before the judge, she burst into tears. She explained that she had just lost her job and was struggling to make ends meet to provide for her children's education. The law should not have cared about those reasons. Violators must pay fines. But Judge Caprio listened not only with his ears, but with his heart. He asked her, "If I uphold the fine, will you have enough money to buy food for your children this week?" The mother bowed her head, tears streaming down her face. She said no. And then Caprio made his decision to drop the fine. He also encouraged her, "Your children will grow up and see that their mother was given a chance. You need to give yourself a chance too." That moment spread around the world. People saw not only a judge forgiving, but also a person giving hope, so that a mother would not feel hopeless.
When a child teaches us about justice. Many times in the courtroom, Caprio invites children to join their parents. For him, children are not just followers, but also witnesses of life. Once, a father was fined for speeding. He brought his young son with him. Caprio looked at the boy and asked, "Do you think I should be fined?" The boy hesitated, then smiled and said, "Yes." The whole courtroom burst into laughter. But Caprio did not stop there. He continued, "If I were the judge, how much would you fine Dad?" The boy gave a small number, enough to help his father remember the lesson, but not too heavy. Caprio nodded, and he did as the child asked. That moment was more than a joke. It was a vivid lesson. Justice is not always harsh. Sometimes an innocent look can remind us that kindness and justice can go hand in hand.
Another story is about a taxi driver who was repeatedly fined for parking violations. When Caprio asked, the driver said that he worked 12 to 14 hours a day to support his family, and that he often had to park in the wrong place because he had to pick up passengers urgently. By law, he deserved the fine, but Caprio realized something important. This was not a lawbreaker, but a man struggling to survive. Caprio reduced the fine by a large amount, keeping only a small, symbolic amount.
He said, "I want you to remember the lesson, but I don't want to take food from your family." That's how a judge turns leniency into power, the power to keep a family from falling into poverty. Another story is about a taxi driver who was repeatedly fined for parking violations. When Caprio asked, the driver said that he worked 12 to 14 hours a day to support his family, and that he often had to park in the wrong place because he had to pick up passengers urgently. By law, he deserved the fine, but Caprio realized something important. This was not a lawbreaker, but a man struggling to survive. Caprio reduced the fine by a large amount, keeping only a small, symbolic amount. He said, "I want you to remember the lesson, but I don't want to take food from your family." That's how a judge turns leniency into power, the power to keep a family from falling into poverty.
You may never have entered Judge Caprio's courtroom, but you have entered the court of life, where every day we must render judgment on others and ourselves. The question is, will you judge or forgive? Try forgiving once. Try asking questions about someone else's situation, because, as Caprio proves, a little kindness can change a life.
And that's the heart of Judge Caprio, the man who turned fines into forgiveness. His courtroom wasn't just a place of punishment. It was a place of second chances, of compassion, and of humanity. But this is only the beginning, because behind every case, there is a story. And behind every story, there is a lesson for us all. In the next episode, we'll dive into one of the most powerful lessons of all: why compassion is the strongest law. A story that will show us how kindness can change not only the outcome of a case, but the direction of a life. So don't miss it, because sometimes the smallest act of mercy can become the greatest act of justice.